In the heart of 1935, London, a priceless sapphire vanishes, and a jeweller lies dead in a locked vault. No way in, no way out. Hercule Poirot steps into the fog of Hatton Garden, where greed and betrayal weave a deadly maze. Was it the ambitious partner, the debt-ridden lord, or the scarred guard? A hidden gem, a silken thread, and Poirot's brilliant mind unravel a murder disguised as theft. In the crystal maze, every secret sparkles with danger. Will you follow the clues to the shocking truth? Chapter 1. The Locked Vault. The November fog draped London's Hatton Garden in a shroud of mystery, softening the edges of the grand facades where jewelers traded in dreams and desires. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes clicking precisely on the damp cobblestones, emerged from a taxi, his overcoat buttoned against the chill. His moustache, a masterpiece of symmetry, twitched as he inhaled the crisp air, tinged with the faint metallic scent of the city's commerce. A note from Inspector Japp, delivered with uncharacteristic urgency to Poirot's flat in Whitehaven Mansions, had summoned him to the house of Varnier, a jeweller's establishment renowned for its treasures. "A crime most baffling, Poirot," the note had read, "and one that demands your little grey cells." At the shop's entrance, a constable stood sentinel, his face pale under his helmet. The brass plaque beside the door gleamed with the name Varnier and Company, its elegance a stark contrast to the grim scene within. Inspector Japp, his bowler hat slightly askew, greeted Poirot with a weary nod. "You're a sight for sore eyes, old man," Japp said, his voice rough with fatigue. "We've got a proper puzzle here. André Varnier, the owner, found dead in his own vault, shot through the heart, and the star of Jaipur, biggest sapphire you ever saw, gone." Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, narrowed. "A sapphire, you say? And the vault? How was it secured?" Japp led him through the showroom, where glass cases sparkled with diamonds and rubies, their brilliance dimmed by the morning's tragedy. A narrow staircase descended to the basement, where the vault awaited. The steel door, a formidable slab 3 inches thick, stood ajar, its lock gleaming with German precision. Inside, the air was heavy, scented with wax polish and the faint metallic tang of blood. André Varnier lay sprawled across a velvet-lined table, his tailored suit crumpled, a dark stain spreading from his chest. His eyes, open in death, stared at the ceiling, where a single electric bulb cast a harsh light. Around him, trays of gems, emeralds, garnets, opals, lay untouched, their facets winking like conspirators. But the velvet cushion meant for the star of Jaipur was empty, a mute testament to its theft. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers tracing the air above Varnier's wound. "One shot, clean, precise," he murmured. "No powder burns. A pistol, perhaps, with a silencer?" Japp nodded. "That's what the doctor thinks. But here's the kicker, Poirot. The vault was locked from the inside. Key was in Varnier's pocket, and there's no other way in or out." Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and surveyed the vault. Its walls were seamless steel, cold to the touch, with no hint of hidden panels. A small air vent, no wider than a man's hand, pierced the ceiling, its grill bolted firmly. He tapped the floor, listening for echoes, but the concrete was solid. "No windows, no secret passages," Japp said, scratching his head. "It's impossible, Poirot. The man was alone, locked in, and yet someone shot him and took the gem." Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Impossible, mon ami. Hercule Poirot does not believe in impossibilities. There is always a method, a logic if one observes. He examined the lock, its mechanism intricate yet unyielding. The key, still in Varnier's pocket, was a heavy, ornate thing, its teeth worn from years of use. "This lock," Poirot said. "It requires the key to secure it from within, oui?" And yet the door was found locked. Curious. Japp produced a notebook. "Found him this morning at 7, when the day guard came on. Door was locked, so they broke it open. Last seen alive at 9 last night, when the night guard, Thomas Finch, secured the shop." Poirot's eyes gleamed. And who, pray, had access to this vault? 3 people, besides Varnier, Japp said. His cousin and partner, Elise Varnier. She runs the business side. Lord Reginald Harrowby, a client who was here last night to view the sapphire. And Finch, the guard. They're all upstairs, waiting. Poirot adjusted his tie, his mind already weaving patterns from the threads of Japp's words. "A locked vault, a missing gem, a dead man," he said softly. "It is a maze, Inspector, but every maze has an exit. Let us meet these suspects and see what secrets they hide." As they ascended to the showroom, Poirot's thoughts turned to the Star of Jaipur. A gem of such value wasn't merely a prize, it was a motive, a catalyst for human passions. Greed, envy, betrayal. These were the keys, he knew, that would unlock this mystery. And Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, was determined to find them. Chapter 2. The Suspects Assemble. The showroom of Varnier and Company, bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, was a temple to opulence, its glass cases filled with jewels that sparkled like captive stars. Yet, on this chill November morning of 1935, the air was thick with tension, the brilliance of the gems overshadowed by the shadow of murder. Hercule Poirot, his small, neat figure immaculate in a tailored suit, stood at the center of the room, his green eyes darting from face to face as Inspector Japp prepared to introduce the 3 individuals who held the keys to the mystery of André Varnier's death. The Star of Jaipur was gone. The vault had been locked from within, and Poirot's mind, like a finely tuned instrument, was already probing the silences between words, the flickers of expression that betrayed the heart's secrets. Japp, his bowler hat now in hand, gestured toward a velvet-upholstered chair where a woman sat, her posture rigid as if carved from marble. "This is Madame Elise Varnier," he said, Monsieur Varnier's cousin and business partner. Elise Varnier was a woman of striking presence, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, her features sharp and aristocratic. Her dress, a deep burgundy silk, clung to her slender frame, and her fingers, adorned with rings that caught the light in prismatic flashes, rested lightly on her lap. Yet there was a brittleness to her composure, a tightness about her lips that suggested a storm held in check. "Madame," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "my condolences for your loss. You were close to Monsieur Varnier, oui?" Elise's grey eyes met his, cool and unyielding. "As close as family and business allow, Monsieur Poirot," she replied, her voice low, with a faint French accent that echoed her late cousin's. André was a genius with gems, but reckless. He treated the Star of Jaipur like a toy, showing it to anyone who asked. I warned him it would invite trouble. Her words were measured, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted a ring. A sapphire, he observed, though far smaller than the missing star. "Trouble, madame." Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching. "You speak of thieves, perhaps, or something more. Personal?" Elise's gaze flickered, but she held his stare. Thieves, of course, she said. The star was worth a fortune. André's carelessness was an invitation to disaster. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable, but his mind catalogued her words, her tone, the faint flush that rose to her cheeks. There was more here, he sensed, than mere concern for a lost gem. Japp moved on, directing Poirot's attention to a man standing near a display case, his hands clasped tightly around a silver-headed cane. "Lord Reginald Harrowby," Japp said, "a client with a taste for rare stones." Harrowby was a man in his late 50s, his florid face framed by mutton-chop whiskers, his eyes darting nervously about the room. His tweed suit, though well cut, seemed to hang loosely, as if he had recently lost weight, or sleep. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice booming with forced heartiness, "I've heard of your reputation. A devil of a business, this." He tapped his cane against the floor, a restless gesture that betrayed his unease. "Indeed, milord," Poirot replied, his tone courteous but probing. "You were here last night, I understand, to view the Star of Jaipur?" Harrowby nodded, his fingers tightening on the cane. "Yes, around 8. Varnier showed me the stone. Magnificent thing, like a piece of the night sky. I offered to buy it, but he said it was promised elsewhere. I left soon after." His words were brisk, but Poirot noted the slight sheen of perspiration on his brow, the way his eyes avoided the detective's gaze. "And you saw nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed. "No one else in the shop?" Harrowby shook his head. "Just Varnier and that guard, Finch, hovering about. All seemed in order." Poirot's smile was polite, but his mind was at work. A man of Harrowby's wealth and station did not sweat so easily unless his conscience or his debts were heavy. "Merci, milord," he said, filing away the observation for later scrutiny. The final suspect stood near the shop's entrance, his broad shoulders filling out a worn but clean uniform. "Thomas Finch," Japp said, "the night guard." Finch was a man of rough-hewn features, his face marked by a jagged scar that ran from his left temple to his cheek, giving him a piratical air. His hands, large and calloused, hung at his sides, but his eyes were wary, scanning the room as if expecting an ambush. "I locked up at 9, same as always," he said, his voice a low growl. "Checked the shop, saw nothing out of place. Varnier was in the vault when I left. Didn't hear a thing after that." Poirot studied Finch, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers twitched, as if longing for action. "You heard no shot, Monsieur Finch? No cry?" Finch shook his head. "Vault's soundproof. Could have been a riot down there, and I'd not have known." Poirot's eyes lingered on the scar, a silent question forming. "And you remained at your post until when?" he asked. "Midnight," Finch replied. "Then the day guard took over. I went home." His answers were curt, but Poirot sensed a guardedness, a reluctance to elaborate. Japp cleared his throat. "That's the lot, Poirot. These 3, plus Varnier himself, are the only ones who could have been near that vault last night. No one else had access." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly before the suspects, who sat or stood in uneasy silence. "Each of you," he said, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of authority, "has a connection to Monsieur Varnier, and, by extension, to the Star of Jaipur. Each of you, therefore, has a motive. Greed, perhaps, for a gem of such value. Jealousy, for a partnership strained by ambition. Or revenge, for a wrong we have yet to uncover. Hercule Poirot will find the truth, mes amis, for the truth cannot hide from the little grey cells. Elise Varnier's lips tightened. Harrowby's cane tapped a nervous rhythm, and Finch's scar seemed to pulse under the chandelier's light. Poirot turned to Japp. "I would like to see the shop's records, Inspector, and any correspondence of Monsieur Varnier. The motive lies not only in the heart, but in the ledger, non?" Japp nodded, motioning to a constable to fetch the documents. "There's something else," Japp added, lowering his voice. "Found a note in Varnier's desk, unsigned, offering a large sum for the Star. Looks like he was planning a private sale." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A sale, you say? To whom?" Japp shrugged. "Note didn't say, but it's dated 2 days ago." Poirot's mind raced. A private sale suggested secrecy, perhaps deception. Was Varnier planning to betray his partner, his client, or someone else entirely? The answer, he knew, lay in the delicate interplay of human desires, and he would unravel it, thread by thread. As the suspects were dismissed to wait under police supervision, Poirot lingered in the showroom, his gaze drawn to a display case near the vault's entrance. Its mahogany frame was polished to a mirror-like sheen, but something about its placement struck him as odd. Too close to the staircase, perhaps, or angled in a way that seemed deliberate. He ran a gloved finger along its edge, his mind already constructing a maze of possibilities. "Hastings," he said, turning to his friend, who had just arrived, summoned by a second note from Poirot. "This case is like a fine gem, beautiful, complex, and hiding a flaw that only the keenest eye can see." Captain Hastings, his honest face creased with concern, adjusted his hat. "A bad business, Poirot. A locked vault, a missing sapphire. How do you even begin?" Poirot smiled, his moustache curling. "By observing, mon ami, by listening to what is said and what is not said. Come, let us examine this shop more closely. The truth is here, waiting for Hercule Poirot to claim it." They moved toward the staircase, Poirot's steps light but purposeful. The showroom, with its glittering treasures, seemed to watch them, as if the jewels themselves held secrets. Elise Varnier's composed facade, Harrowby's nervous bluster, Finch's guarded silence, each was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot knew that somewhere among them lay the key to the locked vault. But there was more to this crime, he sensed, than a stolen gem. The murder of André Varnier was no mere robbery gone wrong. It was a calculated act, its roots buried in the passions and betrayals of those who stood to gain or lose everything. As they descended to the vault once more, Poirot's thoughts turned to the Star of Jaipur. Its absence was not merely a loss of wealth, but a symbol, a catalyst that had drawn out the darkness in someone's heart. "The maze," he murmured to Hastings, "isn't the vault, but the human soul. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall navigate it." Chapter 3. The mechanics of the vault, the basement of Varnier and Company, was a stark contrast to the opulent showroom above, its air cool and faintly damp, carrying the sterile scent of steel and stone. Hercule Poirot, his small frame silhouetted against the vault's open door, stood motionless, his green eyes absorbing every detail of the chamber where André Varnier had met his end. The morning's fog had seeped into his bones, but his mind was alight, passing the enigma of a locked vault, a murdered jeweler, and a vanished sapphire. Inspector Japp, hovering at his side, shifted impatiently, his notebook clutched like a talisman against the puzzle that defied him. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, lingered a step behind, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding. We must understand the vault itself, for it is the silent witness to this crime. He stepped inside, his patent leather shoes tapping lightly on the concrete floor. The vault was a fortress within a fortress, its walls clad in seamless steel plates, polished to a dull gleam under the electric bulb's harsh light. The table where Varnier's body had lain, now removed to the morgue, was bare save for a scattering of velvet trays, each cradling gems that sparkled with defiant beauty. The empty cushion, once home to the star of Jaipur, seemed to mock the scene with its absence. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the edge of the vault door, a massive slab of German engineering, its lock a marvel of precision. "This lock," he said, turning to Japp. "It is operated only by a key, oui?" "And the key was found in Monsieur Varnier's pocket?" Japp nodded, producing the key from an evidence bag. It was a heavy, ornate piece, its brass surface etched with intricate patterns, its teeth worn but unfunctional. "Only one key to the vault," Japp confirmed. "Varnier kept it on him always. Elise has a duplicate for emergencies, but it's kept in a safe upstairs, and it's still there." Poirot examined the key, holding it to the light as if it might whisper its secrets. "And the mechanism," he said. "It requires the key to lock from within, as well as without." Japp pointed to the lock's inner face, a complex array of tumblers visible through a small glass panel. "Exactly. You turn the key inside. It locks. No other way to secure it. That's what makes this so blasted impossible. Varnier was alone, key in his pocket, door locked." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Impossible, you say, yet here we are." He stepped back, surveying the vault's interior with the precision of a watchmaker. The walls were unyielding, with no seams or panels to suggest a hidden exit. The ceiling, low and oppressive, bore a single air vent, a narrow grille no wider than 6 inches, its bolts rusted but intact. Poirot stood beneath it, his head tilted, then shook his head. "No, this vent is too small for a man, or even a child. And the bolts, they have not been touched in years." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, ventured a suggestion. "Could someone have slipped the key into Varnier's pocket after the shot? Through the vent, perhaps?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval, but he shook his head. "A fine thought, Hastings, but impractical. The vent is too high, too narrow, and the angle impossible for such precision. No, the solution lies elsewhere." Poirot turned his attention to the floor, tapping it with his silver-headed cane. The concrete was solid, its surface unmarred by cracks or trapdoors. He knelt, his knees protesting, and examined the base of the walls, searching for any sign of tampering. "The vault," he murmured, "is a perfect cage." Yet someone entered, killed, and left, leaving it locked. Or did they? His voice trailed off, his thoughts chasing a thread Japp and Hastings could not see. Japp, growing restless, produced a ledger from a satchel. "Here's something that might interest you, Poirot. Varnier's books, pulled from his office upstairs, shows a deposit of £10,000 cash 3 days ago. No name attached, just a note saying, 'Advance for Jaipur.' Sounds like he was planning to sell the Star, and not through the usual channels." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he took the ledger, its pages crisp and meticulously kept. The entry was indeed anonymous, the sum staggering even for a gem of the Star's repute. "An advance," he said, "suggests a buyer with great wealth and great secrecy. But why cash? Why no name?" He flipped through the pages, noting a pattern of smaller, equally cryptic transactions over the past month. Monsieur Varnier was playing a dangerous game, I think, a game that cost him his life. Hastings frowned, his honest face creased with confusion. But if the sapphire was to be sold, why steal it? Why kill him? Poirot smiled, a faint, enigmatic curve of the lips. That, mon cher Hastings, is the heart of the maze. The theft may be a mask, a distraction from the true motive. Or perhaps the sale itself was the spark that ignited murder. Poirot returned to the vault door, examining the lock once more. He inserted the key, turning it slowly, listening to the satisfying click of the tumblers. "This lock," he said, "is a masterpiece, yet it tells us nothing of the killer's method. We must look beyond the mechanics to the human element." He stepped back, his gaze sweeping the vault one final time. "The vault is not the puzzle, mes amis. It is the stage, the real drama played out on the hearts of those who knew it." Japp scratched his head, his frustration palpable. "You're talking in riddles, Poirot. If it's not the vault, then what? We've got 3 suspects, all with alibis, and no way in or out." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Alibis, Inspector, are like jewels. They shine brightly, but some are false. We must polish them until the truth gleams." As they ascended to the showroom, Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of connections. The anonymous deposit, the locked vault, the missing sapphire. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. Elise Varnier's cool detachment, Lord Harrowby's nervous bluster, Thomas Finch's guarded silence. They were players in a game Varnier had lost. But who had dealt the fatal blow? And why had the vault been locked, as if to taunt them with its impossibility? In the showroom, Poirot paused by the mahogany display case he had noted earlier, its position still nagging at his sense of order. He ran a finger along its edge, feeling a slight irregularity in the wood, a scratch, perhaps, or something more deliberate. "Hastings," he said, "this case, it is not as it seems. We will return to it, I think." Hastings nodded, though his expression suggested he saw nothing amiss. Japp, meanwhile, was issuing orders to a constable to guard the vault. "I'm having the lock examined by an expert," he said. "Maybe there's a trick to it we're missing." Poirot nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "The trick, mon ami, is not in the lock, but in the mind that planned this crime. We must ask not how, but why. Why lock the vault at all? Why leave the key in Varnier's pocket?" As they stepped into the fog-shrouded street, Poirot's mind was already mapping the next steps. He would speak to Elise Varnier in private, probe the cracks in her composure. He would investigate Lord Harrowby's finances, for a man of wealth often hid debts behind his title. And Thomas Finch, with his scarred face and wary eyes. There was a story there, one Poirot intended to uncover. The star of Jaipur was more than a gem. It was a beacon, drawing out the greed and desperation of those who coveted it. And Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, would follow that light to the truth. Chapter 4. The Partner's Secret. The fog had thickened over London by late afternoon, cloaking Hatton Garden in a veil of grey that muffled sound and softened the sharp edges of its grand buildings. Hercule Poirot, seated in the elegant drawing-room of his Whitehaven Mansions flat, adjusted the angle of a silver teaspoon on the tea-tray before him. The room was a study in order, polished mahogany furniture, a ticking ormolu clock, and a fire crackling in the grate, casting a warm glow over the scene. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, stood by the window, peering into the mist as if it might yield answers to the mystery of André Varnier's murder. Poirot had invited Madame Elise Varnier for tea, a seemingly innocuous gesture, but one calculated to probe the polished surface of her composure. The star of Jaipur was missing, the vault had been locked, and Poirot's little grey cells were restless, seeking the truth hidden in the shadows of human motives. The doorbell chimed, and Georges, Poirot's impeccable valet, ushered in Madame Varnier. She entered with the grace of a woman accustomed to command, her burgundy dress replaced by a charcoal grey ensemble, its severity softened by a single pearl brooch. Her dark hair was still swept into a chignon, but her eyes, sharp and wary, betrayed a flicker of unease as they met Poirot's. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth but measured. "This is an unexpected courtesy. I trust it is not without purpose." Poirot rose, bowing with his customary flourish. "Madame, it is always a pleasure to converse with one so astute. Please sit." He gestured to a cushioned chair opposite his own, where a porcelain tea service awaited. "A tisane, perhaps? Or do you prefer the English tea?" Elise chose the tisane, her fingers steady as she accepted the cup. But Poirot noted the slight tightening of her grip, a sign of nerves held in check. Hastings, taking a seat nearby, watched with interest, his honest face betraying his curiosity. Poirot poured his own tisane, the scent of chamomile mingling with the room's warmth, and began. "Madame Varnier, you and your cousin, Monsieur André, were partners in Varnier and Company, oui? A business of great repute, built on trust and skill. Yet you said this morning that he was reckless. Tell me, what did you mean?" Elise sipped her tisane, her eyes fixed on the cup. "André was brilliant with gems, Monsieur Poirot, but he lacked caution. He would show the star of Jaipur to clients without proper vetting, flaunting its value. I urged him to keep it in the vault, to limit access. But he laughed at my concerns. He believed his charm could protect him." Her voice carried a trace of bitterness, and Poirot's moustache twitched, sensing a crack in her facade. "Charm, madame, is a fine shield, but not against bullets," Poirot said gently. "You disapproved of his plans for the star, perhaps? The ledger shows a recent deposit, an advance for its sale. Were you aware of this transaction?" Elise's fingers paused on the cup, a fleeting hesitation. "I knew he was negotiating," she said, "but not the details. André handled the star himself. He said it was a private matter." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "A private matter, madame, yet you are his partner, his cousin. Surely such a sale would concern you." Elise's lips tightened, and she set the cup down with deliberate care. "It did concern me," she admitted. "I told him a private sale was risky, that we should go through established channels. But André was stubborn. He believed he could secure a higher price by bypassing the usual brokers." Poirot nodded, his expression one of polite interest, but his mind was cataloguing her words, her gestures. The tremor in her hand had returned, faint but unmistakable. "And this buyer," he said, "you know nothing of them?" "No name, no hint." Elise shook her head. "He was secretive, even with me. I assumed it was one of his wealthy clients, perhaps Lord Harrowby." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Lord Harrowby, who visited last night? Interesting." He paused, letting the silence stretch, a technique he knew could unsettle even the most composed. "Madame, you and André were close as family, yet business strained you, ouais? Were there disagreements beyond the Star of Jaipur?" Elise's gaze flickered to the fire, and for a moment her guard seemed to slip. "All partnerships have strains," she said. "André was ambitious. He dreamed of expanding, opening a branch in Paris. I preferred stability here in London. We argued, but it was not personal." Poirot smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Not at all personal, madame. Yet family quarrels can cut deeper than business disputes. Tell me, did André ever speak of enemies, of threats?" Elise's eyes met his, and for the first time Poirot saw a flash of something. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. "No threats," she said, "but the star attracted attention. Collectors, rivals, even criminals. André was naive to think it would not." The conversation paused as George entered to refresh the tea, his movements silent and precise. Poirot used the moment to observe Elise, noting the way her fingers toyed with the pearl brooch, a nervous habit she seemed unaware of. When George withdrew, Poirot changed tack. "Madame, you are a woman of taste, of intelligence. You understand the value of order, of method. Yet this crime, locked vault, missing gem, it defies order. What do you make of it?" Elise's lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. "I am no detective, Monsieur Poirot, but if André was killed, it was for the star. Someone wanted it badly enough to murder him and stage this impossibility." Poirot tilted his head, his voice soft. "Stage, madame? An interesting choice of word. You believe the locked vault was deliberate, a performance?" Elise's eyes widened slightly, as if she had said too much. "I only mean it seems planned," she said quickly. "No one could enter that vault without a key." Poirot nodded, filing away her slip. He rose, signaling the end of the interview. "Merci, Madame Varnier. You have been most helpful. I trust we will speak again." Elise stood, her composure restored, and inclined her head. "I hope you find the truth, Monsieur Poirot," she said, and with a rustle of silk she departed. As the door closed, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. "She's hiding something, isn't she? All that talk of André's recklessness? It felt rehearsed." Poirot adjusted a cushion on his chair, his movements precise. "Oui, Hastings, you are correct. Madame Varnier is a woman of control, yet her control betrays her. The tremor in her hand, the choice of words. She knows more than she says. But what?" He moved to his desk, where a small notebook lay open. "I have made inquiries, mon ami. A colleague at Scotland Yard informs me that Madame Varnier was seen last month, dining with a man known to the police, a gem smuggler, one Monsieur Duval. A coincidence, perhaps, but Poirot does not believe in coincidences." Hastings's eyes widened. "A smuggler? You think she was planning to sell the star herself?" Poirot raised a finger. "Not so fast, Hastings. It is a thread, not a tapestry. We must weave it carefully. Madame Varnier may have been tempted by profit, or perhaps she was gathering information. We must learn more of this. Duval, and of her true relationship with André." The fire crackled, and Poirot's gaze grew distant. "The star of Jaipur is the key, Hastings, but not in the way we first thought. It is not merely a prize. It is a mirror, reflecting the desires of those who coveted it. Elise Varnier's ambition, Lord Harrowby's desperation, Thomas Finch's silence. Each is a facet of this crime. We must polish them until they shine with truth." Hastings nodded, though his expression suggested he was still grappling with the complexity. "What's next, then? Harrowby? Finch?" Poirot smiled, his eyes bright with purpose. "Both, mon ami. But first we return to the shop. That display case. I cannot shake the feeling it holds a secret. and Hercule Poirot never ignores a feeling. As they prepared to leave, Poirot's mind was already mapping the maze. Elise Varnier's guarded words, her connection to a smuggler, her tension. They were clues, but not yet answers. The locked vault, the missing sapphire, the anonymous deposit. They formed a pattern, one that Poirot's little grey cells were determined to unravel. The truth, he knew, was close, hidden in the delicate interplay of human passions, and he would find it, step by meticulous step. Chapter 5. The Client's Alibi. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy drapes of Lord Reginald Harrowby's Mayfair townhouse, casting long shadows across a drawing-room cluttered with the trappings of wealth. Oil paintings of fox hunts and ancestral estates adorned the walls, their gilded frames gleaming dully, while a massive oak sideboard groaned under the weight of silver candelabra and porcelain figurines. Hercule Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair, sipped a tisane served by a nervous footman, his green eyes fixed on Lord Harrowby, who stood by a roaring fire, his silver-headed cane tapping an erratic rhythm against the hearth. Captain Hastings, ever the observer, occupied a settee, his notebook open but untouched, his attention riveted on the exchange about to unfold. The murder of André Varnier and the theft of the Star of Jaipur had drawn Poirot to this opulent setting, seeking to unravel the threads of Lord Harrowby's involvement in the locked vault mystery. Harrowby, his florid face flushed from the fire's heat, or perhaps from unease, cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, his voice carrying the forced joviality of a man accustomed to commanding attention, "I trust you're here to clear up this ghastly business. Varnier was a fine fellow, and that sapphire, well, it was a marvel, a tragedy, all of it." His words were hearty, but his eyes, darting toward the window, betrayed a restlessness that Poirot noted with interest. "Indeed, milord," Poirot said, his tone smooth as polished glass. "A tragedy and a puzzle. You were among the last to see Monsieur Varnier alive, oui? Last night, at 8 o'clock, in his shop. Tell me, what transpired?" He set, his tisane cup down with deliberate care, the faint clink of porcelain punctuating the silence. Harrowby gripped his cane, its silver head catching the firelight. "I went to view the Star of Jaipur," he said. "I've a passion for rare gems, you see. Varnier showed it to me in the showroom, not the vault. Said it was safer there for a brief inspection. A magnificent stone, like a drop of midnight. I offered to buy it on the spot, a fair price, mind you. But Varnier refused, said it was promised to another buyer, though he wouldn't name them. I left shortly after, perhaps 10 minutes past 8. His account was brisk, delivered with the confidence of a man used to being believed, but Poirot's moustache twitched, sensing a rehearsed quality. "And you saw no one else, milord?" Poirot pressed, his voice gentle but insistent. "No one lingering in the shop, no unusual behavior from Monsieur Varnier?" Harrowby shook his head, his whiskers quivering. "Just Varnier and that guard, Finch, skulking about. Varnier seemed his usual self, charming, a bit boastful. Nothing out of the ordinary." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And your destination after leaving the shop? You were seen, I believe, at your club?" Harrowby nodded, a touch too eagerly. "Yes, the Carlton Club. Dined with Sir Henry Mortimer and Lord Cranston. Stayed till nearly midnight, playing cards." His fingers tightened on the cane, and Poirot noted a faint sheen of perspiration on his brow, despite the coolness of the room. Most interesting, Poirot said, his smile polite but probing. A solid alibi, milord, and yet the star of Jaipur is gone, and Varnier is dead. You desired the sapphire, oui? A man of your means would find such a gem a fitting addition to his collection. The implication hung in the air, and Harrowby's flush deepened. I'm no thief, Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice rising. Nor a murderer. I wanted the stone, yes, but I'm a gentleman, not a criminal. His indignation seemed genuine, but Poirot's gaze lingered on the cane, its silver head worn from constant handling. Of course, milord, Poirot said soothingly, but in a crime such as this, every detail matters. Tell me, had you dealt with Varnier before? Harrowby relaxed slightly, sensing safer ground. Many times. I've bought several pieces from Varnier and Company over the years. Emeralds, a ruby brooch for my late wife. André was always professional, if a bit flamboyant. Poirot nodded, filing away the information. And Madame Varnier, his partner? Did you deal with her as well? Occasionally, Harrowby said. She's the brains of the operation, handles the books. A sharp woman, but cold. Not like André, who could charm a snake. His tone carried a hint of disdain, and Poirot's interest sharpened. A rift between Elise Varnier and her clients, perhaps. Another thread to tug. The interview concluded. Poirot rose, adjusting his tie with meticulous care. Merci, Lord Harrowby. You have been most forthcoming. We shall speak again, I think. Harrowby escorted them to the door, his relief palpable, but Poirot's mind was already at work dissecting the man's words. As they stepped into the fog-shrouded street, Hastings turned to him, his brow furrowed. He seemed nervous, Poirot, but his alibi sounds watertight. Dinner at the Carlton with 2 lords. Hard to argue with that. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Watertight, Hastings? Perhaps, but even the finest ship may have a hidden leak. Lord Harrowby's alibi is too perfect, his story too polished. And his nerves. Did you see the cane, how he gripped it? A man of his station does not sweat so easily unless his conscience is heavy. They hailed a taxi, and Poirot continued, his voice low. I have made discreet inquiries, mon ami. Lord Harrowby is a man of wealth, but also of debts. Gambling, it seems, has drained his coffers. A sapphire like the star could solve many problems, none. Hastings's eyes widened. You think he stole it to sell it? But the vault, how could he get in? Poirot smiled, a faint, enigmatic curve of the lips. That, Hastings, is the question. But I suspect Lord Harrowby knows more than he tells. His visit to Varnier was no mere whim. We must verify this alibi, and we must learn who this mysterious buyer was, the one Varnier spoke of. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot telephoned Scotland Yard, requesting confirmation of Harrowby's movements. The reply came swiftly. Sir Henry Mortimer and Lord Cranston had indeed dined with Harrowby at the Carlton Club, their statements corroborating his timeline. Yet Poirot remained unsatisfied. Too convenient, he murmured, pacing before the fire. An alibi so firm suggests preparation. We must look closer, Hastings, at the spaces between his words. He paused, his thoughts returning to the shop, to the mahogany display case that had caught his eye. Its odd placement, the faint scratch on its edge, details that nagged at his sense of order. Tomorrow, he said, we return to Varnier and Company. That case, I think, holds a secret, and Hercule Poirot will uncover it. But for now, we watch, we listen, and we wait. The truth, mon ami, is like a gem. It hides in plain sight, waiting for the right light to reveal it. As the fog pressed against the windows, Poirot's mind wove a tapestry of possibilities. Lord Harrowby's debts, Elise Varnier's secrecy, Thomas Finch's reticence. Each was a facet of the crime, reflecting motives of greed, desperation, or betrayal. The star of Jaipur was the center of this maze, but the murder of André Varnier was its heart, and Poirot was determined to find the pulse that drove it. Chapter 6. The Guard's Tale. The docks of London, shrouded in the early evening mist of November 1935, hummed with the rough energy of commerce, the air thick with the tang of tar and salt. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp chill, navigated the narrow streets with a precision that belied the uneven cobblestones beneath his patent leather shoes. Beside him, Inspector Japp trudged with a determined scowl, his bowler hat tilted against the wind, while Captain Hastings followed, his face a mixture of curiosity and discomfort at the gritty surroundings. They were bound for the modest flat of Thomas Finch, the night guard at Varnier and Company, whose scarred face and terse demeanour had piqued Poirot's interest. The locked vault, the missing star of Jaipur, and the murder of André Varnier formed a puzzle that demanded every thread be examined, and Finch, Poirot sensed, held a piece of it. The flat was a narrow, two-story building, wedged between a tavern and a chandler's shop, its brick facade stained by years of soot. A single gas lamp flickered outside, casting a feeble glow as Poirot knocked sharply on the door. It opened to reveal Finch, his burly frame filling the doorway, his scar, a jagged line from temple to cheek, stark under the lamplight. His eyes, wary and guarded, flicked from Poirot to Japp. "Expected you'd come," he said, his voice a low growl. "Best come in, then." The sitting room was sparse, its furnishings worn but clean. A sagging armchair, a deal table, and a small coal fire that did little to warm the space. On the mantel stood a photograph in a chipped frame, showing Finch with a young woman, her smile bright against his grim expression. Poirot's gaze lingered on it, but he said nothing, taking the offered chair with a nod of thanks. Japp remained standing, his notebook at the ready, while Hastings settled awkwardly on a stool, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting clues to leap from the shadows. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot began, his voice smooth but probing, "you were the night guard at Varnier and Company, responsible for the shop's security. Tell me, if you please, of your duties on the night Monsieur Varnier died." Finch leaned against the table, his hands clasped tightly, his scar seeming to pulse in the firelight. "Same as always," he said. "I locked the shop at 9, after Lord Harrowby left. Checked the showroom, the office, the back entrance. All secure. Varnier was in the vault, working late, as he often did. I saw him through the door's glass panel, alive and well. Then I patrolled till midnight, when the day guard took over. Heard nothing. Saw nothing." Poirot tilted his head, his green eyes sharp. "Nothing, Monsieur Finch. In a shop of such value, with a gem like the Star of Jaipur at stake, you heard no sound, no hint of a trouble." Finch's jaw tightened, but his gaze held steady. "The vault's soundproof, sir. You could fire a cannon in there, and I'd not hear it from the showroom. My job was the doors and windows, and they were tight as a drum." Japp interjected, his tone sharp. "And you didn't check the vault again? Seems a bit lax." For a guard, Finch's eyes flashed, but he kept his voice even. "Varnier didn't like interruptions, said he'd lock up when he was done. I trusted him to do it." Poirot noted the defensive edge, the way Finch's fingers twitched, as if resisting the urge to clench into fists. "Trusted him, oui," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet he is dead. The sapphire gone. Tell me, Monsieur Finch, how long have you worked for Varnier and Company?" Finch shifted, his scar catching the light. 3 years, give or take. Steady work, decent pay. Varnier was a fair boss, though he could be high-handed. Poirot's moustache twitched. High-handed? In what way? Finch shrugged, a gesture that seemed forced. Liked things his way. Didn't always listen to advice, even from Madame Varnier. They'd argue, sometimes, loud enough to hear from the showroom. Poirot's interest sharpened. Argue, you say? About what? Finch hesitated, then said, "Business, mostly." She wanted to sell the Star through proper channels. He wanted a private deal. Said it'd bring in more. Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp, who made a note. This corroborated Elise Varnier's account, but Finch's reluctance suggested more. "And you, Monsieur Finch," Poirot continued, "you had no opinion on this matter. A guard so close to the heart of the shop must hear many things." Finch's eyes narrowed, but he shook his head. "Not my place to have opinions. I locked the doors, kept watch, that's all." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "And yet, Monsieur Finch, you are not without connections. This photograph—" he gestured to the mantel. "Who is the young woman?" Finch's face hardened, his scar seeming to deepen. "My sister, Mary. She's a maid, works for Lord Harrowby. What's that got to do with anything?" Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. "Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. A connection between you and a client of Varnier's is interesting, non?" Finch's hands clenched, but he said nothing. Japp, sensing an opening, stepped forward. "We found a pawn ticket in your things, Finch. Dated the day after the murder for a watch. Bit of extra cash, was it? Or something else?" Finch's eyes widened, then narrowed. "I needed money," he said gruffly. "Mary's been ill. Doctor's bills. I pawned my watch, that's all." His tone was defiant, but Poirot noted a flicker of fear, quickly masked. "Most understandable," Poirot said, rising to examine the photograph more closely. Mary Finch, with her bright smile, was a stark contrast to her brother's grim demeanour, a link to Harrowby, a man with debts and a desire for the Star of Jaipur, another thread in the maze. "Merci, Monsieur Finch," Poirot said, turning back. "You have been most helpful. We will not detain you further." As they stepped into the misty street, Japp muttered, "He's hiding something, Poirot. That pawn ticket. Too convenient. Right after the murder." Poirot nodded, his cane tapping the cobblestones. "Oui, Inspector. But what? A bribe, perhaps, or a payment for silence, or merely a man desperate for funds? We must verify this story of his sister's illness." Hastings, trailing behind, piped up. "That photograph. Do you think Harrowby's involved with Finch somehow? A plot, maybe?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A plot, Hastings? Perhaps. But the human heart is rarely so simple. Finch is loyal, I think. But to whom? His sister? His employer? Or himself? And this connection to Harrowby. It is a bridge we must cross carefully." He paused, his thoughts returning to the shop, to the mahogany display case that still nagged at his sense of order. "Tomorrow we return to Varnier and Company. That case, I am certain, holds a secret. But for now, we gather our threads. Finch's silence, Harrowby's debts, Elise's ambitions. The Star of Jaipur is the light, but the murder is the shadow, and Hercule Poirot will find where they meet." The fog swirled around them, a fitting cloak for the mystery that deepened with every step. Finch's guarded tale, his link to Harrowby, the pawn ticket, they were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot's little grey cells were already assembling, seeking the pattern that would unlock the truth of the locked vault. Chapter 7. The Display Case. The morning sun pierced the fog over Hatton Garden, casting a pale glow through the tall windows of Varnier and Company's showroom, where the jewels in their glass cases sparkled with a cold, defiant beauty. Hercule Poirot, his small figure immaculate in a charcoal suit, stood before the mahogany display case that had haunted his thoughts since his first visit. Its polished surface gleamed, yet its position, slightly askew, too close to the vault's staircase, jarred his sense of order. Inspector Japp, his bowler hat tucked under his arm, watched with a mix of skepticism and anticipation, while Captain Hastings, ever eager, hovered nearby, his notebook open as if expecting a revelation to leap from the woodwork. The murder of André Varnier and the theft of the Star of Jaipur remained an enigma, but Poirot's little grey cells were alight, certain that this unassuming piece of furniture held a key to the locked vault mystery. "Mon ami," Poirot said, addressing Japp, his voice soft but carrying the weight of conviction. "This case, it is not merely a display for gems. It is a silent witness, and I believe it has a story to tell." He ran a gloved finger along the case's edge, pausing at the faint scratch he had noticed before. A mark so subtle it might have been overlooked by a less meticulous eye. The case was heavy, its mahogany frame carved with delicate floral motifs, its velvet-lined interior designed to showcase a single, exquisite piece. Though it stood empty now, its usual occupant, a diamond tiara, temporarily removed to the vault for safekeeping. Japp scratched his head, his patience wearing thin. "It's just a display case, Poirot. We've searched the shop top to bottom. If the star's hidden, it's not here." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or exasperation. "Patience, Inspector. The obvious is often the most deceptive. This case, its placement, it is wrong, non? Too close to the staircase, where it risks being bumped, yet it has been moved recently." "Why?" Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, ventured a guess. "To hide something, perhaps? A secret compartment?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. "Précisément, Hastings. You begin to think like Poirot, though not yet with the same finesse." He tapped the case's base with his silver-headed cane, listening for a hollow sound. The faint echo that answered confirmed his suspicion. "Inspector," he said, "with your permission, we must examine this case more closely. A screwdriver, if you please." Japp signalled to a constable, who fetched a toolkit from the shop's office. Under Poirot's direction, the constable carefully removed the case's velvet lining, revealing the wooden base beneath. Poirot knelt, his knees protesting the cold floor, and inspected the seams. "Here," he said, pointing to a panel that seemed slightly raised, its edges misaligned by a fraction of an inch. With a gentle push, the panel clicked open, revealing a shallow compartment, cunningly concealed within the case's base. Japp's eyes widened as Poirot reached inside, his gloved hand emerging with a small bundle wrapped in black cloth. He unfolded it with care, and there, catching the sunlight in a blaze of blue fire, was the Star of Jaipur. The sapphire, as large as a pigeon's egg, shimmered with an otherworldly brilliance, its facets reflecting the room in a kaleidoscope of light. Hastings gasped, and even Japp, seasoned by years of police work, let out a low whistle. "Good Lord, Poirot," he said. "It's been here all along." Poirot's smile was faint but triumphant. "Oui, Inspector. Hidden in plain sight, where no thief would think to look, because the theft, I believe, was never the true crime." He held the sapphire to the light, its depth mesmerizing, then handed it to Japp, who placed it in an evidence bag with reverent care. "But why hide it?" Japp asked, his brow furrowed. "If the killer took it, why not run with it?" Poirot rose, brushing dust from his trousers. "That, mon ami, is the heart of the matter. The star wasn't stolen to be kept, but to mislead. The murder of André Varnier was the goal. And this," he gestured to the sapphire, "was a distraction, a curtain drawn across the stage to obscure the true motive." Hastings, still staring at the now empty compartment, shook his head. "But who, Poirot? Elise, Harrowby, Finch, any of them could have done it. But how?" Poirot paced slowly before the case, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm. "Consider, Hastings, the nature of this hiding place. It is clever, yes, but not complex. The panel was crafted recently. See the fresh wood shavings to the lack of dust. Someone with access to the shop, someone familiar with its workings, prepared this compartment. Not a casual thief, but one who knew the case would not be moved, at least not immediately." Japp nodded, catching the thread. "So, someone inside, Elise or Finch most likely. Harrowby's a client, not likely to tamper with the furniture." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps, Inspector, but do not dismiss Lord Harrowby so quickly. His debts make him desperate, and desperation breeds ingenuity. Yet I agree, the partner or the guard is more probable. Madame Varnier, with her knowledge of the shop's inventory, or Finch, with his constant presence, either could have devised this." He turned back to the case, examining the scratch on its edge. "This mark," he said, "it is not accidental. It suggests the case was moved, perhaps in haste, to access the compartment. We must ask ourselves, when was this done? Before or after the murder?" Japp frowned, his notebook open. "The shop was locked at 9, according to Finch. Varnier was alive then. Could have been after. But that means the killer stayed in the shop, risking discovery." Poirot nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. "Or," he said, "the killer was already inside, trusted, unnoticed. The vault was locked, the key in Varnier's pocket, yet the sapphire was here. This suggests a sequence, a plan. The murder, the hiding of the gem, the lock-in of the vault, all part of a single act, staged with precision." Hastings, his enthusiasm rising, interjected. "But the vault, Poirot. How did the killer get out? It's still impossible." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Not impossible, Hastings, but clever. The vault is a distraction, like the sapphire. We focus on its locks, its walls, but the truth lies in the human element. Someone entered, killed, hid the gem, and left, all while leaving the vault sealed. We must look to motive, to opportunity." Japp, securing the evidence bag, turned to Poirot. "What now?" "We've got the sapphire, but we're no closer to the killer." Poirot adjusted his tie, his expression serene. "On the contrary, Inspector, we are closer than you think. The sapphire's hiding place narrows our field. It points to someone with intimate knowledge of the shop, someone who could act unseen. We must now press our suspects, Madame Varnier, Lord Harrowby, Monsieur Finch. One of them knows this case's secret, and Hercule Poirot will make them reveal it." As they left the showroom, The constable guarding the sapphire, Poirot's thoughts turned to the suspects. Elise Varnier's cool detachment, her link to a smuggler. Harrowby's debts, his too-perfect alibi. Finch's guarded silence, his sister's connection to Harrowby. Each was a piece of the mosaic. The Star of Jaipur, now recovered, was no longer the prize, but a beacon, illuminating the path to a murderer's heart. Poirot's cane tapped the pavement as they stepped into the fading light, his mind already plotting the next move in this intricate game. Chapter 8. The Motive Revealed. The showroom of Varnier and Company glowed with the soft radiance of its chandeliers, the jewels in their cases casting prismatic reflections across the polished floor. It was the evening of the third day since André Varnier's murder, and Hercule Poirot had summoned the three suspects, Madame Elise Varnier, Lord Reginald Harrowby, and Thomas Finch, to the scene of the crime. The Star of Jaipur, recovered from its hiding place in the mahogany display case, lay on a velvet cushion under a spotlight, its blue depths shimmering like a captured sea. Inspector Japp stood by the vault's entrance, his arms crossed, his eyes darting between the suspects, while Captain Hastings, notebook in hand, watched with bated breath. Poirot, his small figure commanding the room, stood before the sapphire, his green eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had unraveled a knotty puzzle. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we are gathered here to resolve the mystery of Monsieur André Varnier's death and the theft of the Star of Jaipur. A crime most perplexing, no? A man shot in a locked vault, a priceless gem hidden in a display case, and three suspects, each with motive and opportunity. But Hercule Poirot has seen through the shadows, and the truth, it is now clear." Elise Varnier, seated in a high-backed chair, her charcoal grey dress immaculate, fixed Poirot with a steady gaze, though her fingers, adorned with rings, betrayed a faint tremor. Lord Harrowby, leaning on his silver-headed cane, stood near a glass case, his florid face pale under the chandelier's light. Thomas Finch, by the door, his scar stark against his weathered skin, shifted his weight, his eyes wary but defiant. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by the faint tick of a clock in the office beyond. Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm. "Let us begin with the facts," he said. "Monsieur Varnier was found dead, shot through the heart, in a vault locked from within, the key in his pocket. The Star of Jaipur was missing, yet we found it hidden in a compartment within this display case." He gestured to the mahogany case, its secret panel now exposed. The vault. It seemed impossible to enter or exit, yet a murder was committed, and the gem was concealed. How? Why? These are the questions that have guided Poirot's little grey cells. He turned to the suspects, his gaze sweeping over them. Each of you had a connection to Varnier, to the Star. Madame Varnier, you were his partner, his cousin, with access to the shop and its secrets. Lord Harrowby, you desired the sapphire, your debts pressing heavily. Monsieur Finch, you guarded the shop, your loyalty perhaps divided by other ties. But only one of you planned this crime, and Poirot knows who. Elise's lips tightened, Harrowby's cane twitched, and Finch's hands clenched. Poirot continued, his voice soft but unrelenting. "The key to this mystery is not the vault, but the motive. Monsieur Varnier was not killed for the Star of Jaipur, though it was made to appear so. The theft was a ruse, a distraction to mask the true intent. Murder. And the murderer? They hid the sapphire in the display case to delay its discovery, to confuse the police. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Madame Varnier, he said, turning to Elise, you told Poirot that André was reckless, that he planned a private sale of the star. But you knew more, oui? You knew he had found a buyer, a smuggler named Duval, with whom you yourself had dined weeks ago. Elise's eyes widened, but she remained silent, her composure a fragile mask. Poirot pressed on. André discovered your dealings with Duval, did he not? He learned you planned to sell the star illicitly, to keep the profits for yourself. He threatened to expose you, to ruin your reputation and the business. This, madame, was a motive for murder. Elise's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. I warned André against rash deals, nothing more. Poirot smiled, a faint, knowing curve of the lips. No proof, madame. Then let us consider the method. You entered the vault with André that night, under the pretense of discussing inventory. You carried a small pistol, silenced, which you used to shoot him. You then hid the star in the display case's secret compartment, a compartment you knew well, having overseen the shop's furnishings. You locked the vault from within, slipped the key into André's pocket, and exited through the showroom before Finch locked the shop at 9. Harrowby's cane clattered against a case, and Finch's scar seemed to pulse, but Elise remained still, her eyes cold. A fine story, Monsieur Poirot, she said, but pure conjecture. Poirot raised a finger, his expression serene. Conjecture, madame? Non. Observe this. He produced a small evidence bag from his pocket, holding up a single thread of charcoal-grey silk. This thread, found caught in the vault's hinge, matches the dress you wore yesterday. A small detail, but one that places you in the vault at the time of the crime. Japp stepped forward, his notebook open. And there's more, Poirot. We've had word from Duval, the smuggler. He's in custody, and named you, Madame Varnier, as his contact for the star's sale. Elise's composure cracked, her hands trembling openly. Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes were unrelenting. You planned to betray André, to sell the star, and flee with the profits. But he discovered your scheme, and so you acted, staging the theft to mislead us. The room was silent, the sapphire's light casting eerie shadows. Harrowby cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. Good heavens, Poirot, is this true? Finch, his eyes on Elise, said nothing, but his shoulders slumped, as if relieved of a burden. Elise rose, her face pale but defiant. You are clever, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low. But you cannot prove intent. Poirot shook his head. Intent, madame, is written in your actions. The thread, the smuggler's testimony, the hidden sapphire. These are the brushstrokes of your guilt. You killed André Varnier to protect your secret, and the locked vault was your final flourish, a puzzle to confound us. But Hercule Poirot is not confounded. Japp signalled to a constable, who moved toward Elise. Madame Varnier, Japp said, you'll come with us. Elise's eyes flashed, but she nodded, her defiance fading into resignation. As she was led away, Poirot turned to the sapphire, its beauty now a silent witness to her downfall. The maze is solved, Hastings, he said softly. The star of Jaipur was the bait, but greed was the trap. Hastings, his notebook forgotten, shook his head in awe. You saw it all, Poirot. The thread, the compartment. How did you know? Poirot's moustache twitched, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what others overlook. The truth, it hides in the details, and Poirot, he always finds it. Chapter 9. The Confession. The air in the showroom of Varnier and Company hung heavy with the aftermath of revelation, the chandeliers casting their soft glow over a scene now stripped of its earlier tension. The star of Jaipur, its blue fire dimmed under the protective glass of an evidence case, stood as a mute testament to the crime that had unraveled. Madame Elise Varnier, her charcoal grey dress a stark contrast to her pallid face, sat rigid in a chair, flanked by 2 constables. Her hands, once adorned with flashing rings, were clasped tightly in her lap, the tremor in them now unmistakable. Hercule Poirot, his small figure commanding despite the quiet of the moment, stood before her, his green eyes sharp, yet not unkind. Inspector Japp, notebook in hand, watched with a grim satisfaction, while Captain Hastings, ever the empathetic observer, hovered nearby, his face a mix of awe and unease at the drama unfolding. The locked vault, the hidden sapphire, the murder of André Varnier. The threads of the maze had been woven together, and now Poirot sought the final knot, Elise's confession. Madame Varnier, Poirot began, his voice low but carrying the weight of inevitability. You stand accused of a most terrible crime, the murder of your cousin, André Varnier, and the staged theft of the Star of Jaipur. The evidence, it is compelling. The thread of silk from your dress, caught in the vault's hinge, the testimony of Monsieur Duval, the smuggler who named you as his partner, in a scheme to sell the sapphire, the hidden compartment in the display case, known to you as the shop's overseer. Yet, Poirot prefers the truth from your own lips. Will you speak, madame, or shall the law speak for you? Elise's gaze, cold and defiant moments before, flickered with something softer, resignation, perhaps, or the weariness of a secret too long held. She raised her head, her eyes meeting Poirot's, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a brittle laugh that echoed like breaking glass, she spoke. You are relentless, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her French accent more pronounced in her fatigue. I thought I had planned it perfectly. But you see too much. Japp leaned forward, his pen poised, while Hastings' eyes widened, his notebook forgotten. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, tilted his head, inviting her to continue. Tell us, madame, he said gently, the truth of that night. Why did André Varnier die? Elise's fingers tightened, her rings glinting faintly. It wasn't meant to end this way, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. André and I built Varnier and Company together, but he changed. He grew reckless, obsessed with fame, with wealth beyond what we had. The Star of Jaipur was his prize, his chance to outshine every jeweller in London. When he told me he had found a private buyer, I warned him. Such deals are dangerous, prone to betrayal. But he wouldn't listen. He laughed, said I was too cautious, that I lacked his vision. She paused, her eyes distant, as if seeing the vault again. I learned of his buyer through a contact, a man named Duval, known in certain circles for moving gems across borders. I met with him, not to betray André, but to understand the deal, to protect our business. Duval offered me a share, a fortune if I helped him secure the star. I refused at first, but the money, it was a temptation. André had plans to expand, to open a branch in Paris, but he was risking everything we had built. I began to see a way out, a way to secure my future. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And so, madame, you planned to sell the star yourself, oui? But André discovered your intentions. Elise's lips twisted, a shadow of bitterness crossing her face. He found a letter from Duval, one I had hidden in my office. He confronted me that evening, after Lord Harrowby left. He was furious, called me a traitor, said he would expose me to the trade, ruin my name. I couldn't let that happen. Varnier and Company was my life, as much as his. Her voice faltered, and she looked down at her hands. We went to the vault to check the star, as we often did. I had the pistol, a small thing, silenced, kept for protection in the shop. I didn't plan to use it, but when he turned his back, shouting about my betrayal, something broke in me. I shot him, just once, and he fell. It was so quick, so quiet. Her words hung in the air stark and unadorned, and Hastings shivered as if the room had grown colder. Poirot's voice was soft, almost compassionate. And then, madame, you staged the scene. The sapphire, the locked vault. How did you manage it? Elise's eyes met his, a spark of defiance returning. I knew the shop, every inch of it. The display case had a false panel. I'd had it made years ago for smaller gems, a precaution André never knew about. I hid the star there, thinking it would be found later, after I was gone. I locked the vault from inside, slipped the key into André's pocket, and left through the showroom. Finch was at the front, locking up, and didn't see me. I was out before 9, and no one suspected. Japp, scribbling furiously, looked up. Clever, madame, but not clever enough. That thread from your dress, it gave you away. Elise's laugh was bitter. A thread. Such a small thing to undo me. I thought I had been so careful. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze steady. The small things, madame, are what betray us. A thread, a glance, a moment's hesitation. These are the truths the heart cannot hide. You killed André to protect your scheme, but also your pride, your place in this world you built together. Elise's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her. I wanted to be free, she whispered. Free of his recklessness, his control. But I am not free, am I? Japp signalled to the constables, who stepped forward. Elise Varnier, he said formally, you're under arrest for the murder of André Varnier. As they led her away, her steps slow but steady, she cast one last glance at the star of Jaipur, its light now a mockery of her ambitions. The door closed behind her, and the showroom fell silent, the sapphire's glow the only movement in the stillness. Hastings, his voice hushed, turned to Poirot. She confessed, just like that. How did you know she'd break? Poirot adjusted his tie, his expression serene. The human soul, Hastings, cannot bear the weight of guilt forever. Madame Varnier was clever, but her crime was born of desperation, and desperation leaves cracks. The thread, the smuggler's testimony. These were pressures she could not withstand. And Poirot, he knows how to apply such pressures. Japp pocketed his notebook, a rare smile breaking through his grim demeanour. You've done it again, Poirot. Wrapped it up neat as a parcel. The Yard'll be pleased. Poirot's moustache twitched, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. The truth, Inspector, is always neat, when one sees it clearly. But we must ensure the star is returned to its rightful owners, and that justice is served. As they stepped into the evening, the fog curling around Hatton Garden's streets, Poirot's mind was already turning to the final details. The maze was solved, the murderer unmasked, but the echoes of Elise's confession lingered, a reminder of the passions that had turned a jewel into a harbinger of death. Hercule Poirot, his cane tapping the pavement, felt the quiet triumph of order restored, yet knew the human heart would always weave new mazes for him to navigate. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The fog that had cloaked London for days had lifted at last, and the late November sun cast a pale, golden light over the Strand, where Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings sat in the elegant dining-room of Simpson's in the Strand. The clink of cutlery and the murmur of conversation filled the air, a soothing contrast to the grim events of the past week. Poirot, his small frame immaculate in a perfectly tailored suit, sipped a sirop de cassis, his green eyes reflecting the satisfaction of a case resolved. Hastings, across from him, tackled a plate of roast beef with enthusiasm, though his brow remained furrowed, as if the intricacies of the Varnier case still lingered in his mind. The Star of Jaipur was safe, Elise Varnier was in custody, and the locked vault's mystery had been unravelled, yet Poirot knew that every triumph left ripples to be addressed. "Poirot," Hastings said, pausing with his fork mid-air, "I still can't quite believe how you pieced it all together. That thread, the display case, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. How do you do it?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mon cher Hastings, it is not magic, but method. The little grey cells they observe, they connect. A thread is not merely a thread, it is a signpost, pointing to the truth. Madame Varnier's guilt was written in her actions, her secrets, and Poirot, he reads such writing." Hastings shook his head, a mix of admiration and exasperation. "But the vault, locked from the inside, the key in Varnier's pocket. I thought it impossible." Poirot set down his glass, his fingers aligning it precisely with the table's edge. "Impossible, none. Clever, yes. But the human mind is always the key. Elise used her knowledge of the shop, her access, to create a puzzle that seemed insoluble. Yet every puzzle has a solution if one looks with clarity." Their conversation paused as a waiter cleared the plates, and Poirot's thoughts turned to the aftermath of the case. The Star of Jaipur had been returned to its insurers, a process overseen by Inspector Japp with meticulous care. The gem, its blue fire now locked away in a bank vault, would likely be auctioned, its brilliance destined for another collector's hands. Varnier and Company, without its founders, faced an uncertain future, though Poirot had heard whispers of a rival jeweller eyeing the premises. The shop's legacy, built on André's flair and Elise's ambition, was now tainted by betrayal and blood. Poirot's inquiries, discreetly conducted through Scotland Yard, had clarified the remaining threads. Lord Reginald Harrowby, cleared of involvement, had quietly settled a portion of his gambling debts, selling a minor estate to do so. His alibi at the Carlton Club, though polished, had held firm under scrutiny, and Poirot suspected his nervousness stemmed more from financial strain than guilt. "A man like Harrowby," Poirot mused aloud, "lives for appearances, but appearances can be costly." Hastings nodded, sipping his coffee. "And Finch?" Poor chap seemed shaken by the whole affair. Poirot's eyes softened, a rare flicker of empathy. "Monsieur Finch, he is a man of loyalty, but to his sister, not his employer. His pawn ticket, it was indeed for her medical bills, verified by the doctor. He resigned from Varnier and Company, I am told, unable to bear the weight of the place where trust was broken." Poirot paused, his gaze distant. "His sister, Mary, continues in Lord Harrowby's service, a small thread that tied our suspects but led nowhere." The dining room's warmth enveloped them, and Poirot savoured the moment of calm. Elise Varnier's trial loomed, her confession ensuring a swift conviction, though Poirot felt no triumph in her downfall. She was clever, he said, almost to himself, but greed is a poor architect. It builds grand plans, only to collapse under its own weight. Hastings, catching the melancholy note, leaned forward. "You sound almost sorry for her, Poirot." Poirot's smile was faint but poignant. "Not sorry, Hastings, but aware. The human heart, it is a maze of desires. Greed, pride, fear. Elise sought freedom, but chose a path that led to chains. It is a lesson, non? In the pursuit of wealth, one may lose everything." The meal concluded, they stepped into the crisp evening air, the Strand bustling with life. Poirot adjusted his hat, his cane tapping the pavement with a familiar rhythm. "The Star of Jaipur," he said. "It was a beacon, drawing out the darkness in those who coveted it. But the true crime was not its theft, but the betrayal it revealed. And Hercule Poirot, he has restored order, for now." Hastings, buttoning his coat, grinned. "Until the next mystery, Poirot?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, a spark of anticipation. "Always, mon ami. The world, it is full of mazes, and Poirot, he is never idle." As they walked into the night, the lights of London glimmered like jewels, each a story waiting to be told, and Poirot's little grey cells stood ready for the challenge.